Hello, today I'm going to take a look at a wine that I hope is a real benchmark for Chianti Classico Reservas. This is Querciabella's 2017, as I say, Chianti Classico Riserva. Querciabella, meaning beautiful oak, is an estate that was founded in 1974 by Giuseppe Castiglione. I believe he produced the first Chianti Classico Riserva in 1979. In 1988, his son Sebastiano was instrumental in converting the estate to being organic, and by 2000 they were using biodynamic practices. The only thing being that Sebastiano, being an advocate for animal rights, they don't believe in using any animal preparations. Therefore the use of preparations such as horn dung can't go on. So that slightly dilutes their biodynamic credentials, but does mean that the wines are 100% vegan. Certainly there was a stage where Querciabella had some of the largest area of organically certified vineyards anywhere in Italy. They have 74 hectares of vines in the heart of Chianti, in the Chianti Classico region, spread through 4 communes being Greve, Panzano, Radda and Gaiole. They also own 32 hectares of vines in Maremma, down by the coast, but outside the Chianti region. These days the Chianti Classico Riserva is produced in most years, although I understand from the literature that it's possible they might not make it as a Riserva if it doesn't reach the required quality in a particular year. For the period between 1999 and 2011, however, they didn't make any Chianti Classico Riserva, simply because amongst their portfolio of wines, they had some IGT wines. There's a barrel-fermented white. There is what is now a Cabernet Sauvignon and Sangiovese blend, Camartina, and there's also a Merlot. In 1999 it was decided that because the Camartina blend was predominantly Sangiovese, there was no point in making the two wines. There was too much overlap between the two of them. However, in the intervening period, the estate acquired further vineyards in Greve and gained their vineyards in Radda and Gaiole, meaning that there was more high quality Sangiovese available to them anyway. The Chianti Classico Riserva is made from vineyards in 3 of the communes there, so Greve, Radda and Gaiole. Querciabella see different characteristics coming from these different locations. The soils in Greve are sandstone soils, they're southeast facing and give a freshness to the wine. The soils in Radda have more slate in them and to give dark fruit flavours and firmer tannins, whereas the vineyards in Gaiole are limestone based, ensuring the wine has good acidity and ripe fruit flavours. Querciabella make the point that as of the change in the law of 2014, this wine could be made and sold as a Gran Selezione, but they choose not to do that. This wine is 100% Sangiovese. You can produce a blend for Chianti, but again they're looking for a pure expression of this one variety. Yields are kept down to about 30 hectolitres per hectare. 2017 was one of the driest vintages on record in Chianti Classico. Frosts in April affected some vineyards at lower levels. However, Querciabella's vineyards in these 3 communes are all at between 300 and 500 metres above sea level, so they weren't affected by this. There was welcome rain in September, which ensured the vines were able to ripen the fruit sufficiently. Healthy fruit was picked with a vibrant fruit profile, fantastic concentration. This wine was made from premium parcels from the best vineyards. They were hand-picked and vinified lot by lot. At the end of fermentation, the wine was aged for 16 months in oak barrels, 20% of which were new. These were tight-grained oak, so probably French, but that's not actually specified in the details I've seen. And these were a combination of 225-litre barriques and 500-litre tonneaux. There was a high degree of selection of just the best barrels at blending, and then once the wine was bottled, it aged for at least a further year in the estate cellars to give it that Riserva classification. As 2017, I would hope that this is a wine that's just starting to drink, and I would assume that from a producer of this quality, this is probably a wine that will age for about 15 years. So let's have a look at it and see what we make. There is a nice sort of depth to the ruby red colour here. It's not particularly dark, however. I can see straight through the wine, and the stem of the glass is very clearly visible. As I swirl the wine, It's 14% alcohol. There are some tears forming on the side of the glass, nothing excessive. Let's have a look at the aroma, shall we? The aromas are actually sort of framed with tertiary notes. There's a sort of a touch of forest floor, touch of cedary oak, but in the midst of that there's a sort of a core of quite bright but relatively concentrated red cherry fruit, perhaps a little bit of sort of plumminess, maybe some raspberry, sort of fresh red fruit high tones, but yes, just a little restrained, probably as a result of the oak aging and further bottle age as well. So let's have a taste and see what we make of it. Wow, that's incredibly well defined Chianti. I was going to say Sangiovese, but actually, I mean, in terms of the Sangiovese, there's beautiful acidity. It's, you know, tongue-tinglingly so. There's lovely, fresh red fruit that's really sort of pushing past the drying oak there. But then the thing that makes it Chianti is that there is this quite firm level of very, very fine tannins, and that's coming partially from the fruit and partially from the oak. Everything is so well defined, and I think the excellent acidity is giving it beautiful definition, but there's also a real concentration of fruit flavour. Yes, there's all that bright red fruit, sort of fresh cherries, touches of sort of more high tone, more sort of raspberry notes, a plummy richness, all there, but there's a sort of a core of sort of slightly bitter notes, almost make me think of licorice, although perhaps not quite that concentrated. There is, you know, that bit of drying grip, but it's not completely astringent. There's a little bit of sort of graphite note in there. There are notes of cedar. I suppose there are touches of sort of a cinnamon sort of note there, but also that slightly more savoury note of nutmeg or something like that. The alcohol at 14% is giving roundness, but it's not really giving a lot of weight to the mid-palate. The mid-palate is medium, maybe medium to full, but the structure is not particularly heavy. And I think some of that is the acidity, again, sort of keeping everything fresh and lively and stopping it from sort of seeming too solid and harsh. Some of the flavours are lasting quite nicely. There is a sort of a slight tertiary sort of forest floor note with delicate red. It's that sort of lifted perfumed raspberry fruit coming through again. But then there is a sort of a drying, as I say, forest floor, tobacco leaf sort of note as well on the back palate. I think this is a wine that will open up with a little more time. It's already 6 years old, so it should be reasonably approachable, but I think such is the tightness and such is the tension that comes from the acidity that this is a wine that you could keep for much, much longer than this. I think it's a good example of pure Sangiovese fruit and of lovely Chianti winemaking. This is a really nice example. It has depth and richness, but at the same time it has the lightness and elegance that comes from this beautiful Sangiovese fruit. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you found it interesting, do please consider liking it in the box below. Do share it with your friends. Do leave your comments. We would love to hear what you think either about this wine or other Chiantis or other wines of this style that you've tried. Do consider signing up and following us, and that way you'll be able to join us in the very near future for further of these YouTube tastings. Hope to see you again soon. Bye now.